They say it takes more muscles to frown than to smile, so next time someone tells you to smile, say you're strength training your face. Catchy theme song, yeah.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much for 100 subscribers. I only have 2 videos out, so it's wild to have so much support so soon. Thank you again. Today, I watched the movie Smile for you, and let's just say I have some opinions about it. Smile was based on a short called Laura Hasn't Slept, which is much faster and gets straight to the point. The titular character Laura appears in Smile, but based on the ending of Laura Hasn't Slept, I'm not quite sure if this is a continuation of the short or just an entirely different story. Smile opens on a woman passing out, or passing on, in bed as the camera pans past her room full of empty wine and pill bottles. And I was thinking, if you replaced the wine and pills with cans of Diet Coke and bags of McDonald's, I could be looking in a mirror. And we are shown a little girl standing in the doorway in fear, which turns out to be our main character, Rose Cotter. Cotter? I hardly know her. Present-day Rose is startled awake from a daydream by her phone ringing, and we learn that she is a therapist in an emergency psychiatric unit. Rose's boss, who is played by the man who was Kumar in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, and I realize I'm dating myself with that reference, comments how Rose has been in the office since late last night and heavily implies that she should go home. So Rose packs up her belongings and leaves her office, but the camera pans to her office phone as it rings, and we hear Rose rush back in and answer it. Shoulda gone home, Rose. The phone call leads Rose to meet PhD student Laura, who was the sole witness in watching her professor bludgeon himself a week ago. So Rose is under the impression that that traumatic event is what's causing Laura to act so panicked currently. Laura claims to be seeing something that wears people's faces as a mask and has this horrifying smile. It can apparently look like anyone, even her grandpa who passed away when she was 7. It pulled a Samara from The Ring and told her that today is her last day, and that's what's causing Laura to panic. She begins screaming, "It's here!" as she dramatically falls over and knocks the flower vase off of the table. And as she's screaming in terror, Rose runs to the phone to call for help. Laura's screaming comes to an abrupt stop as Rose turns and sees her standing there with a menacing smile and a shard from the broken vase, and she decides to cosplay as the Joker. Shoulda gone home, Rose. Rose is then interrogated by 2 detectives, Detective Buckley and Joel, and at first I thought Joel was played by Frankie Muniz. Joel isn't credited with a last name in this movie, and I'm just trying to picture how this would work. Yes, we're here to ask you a few questions. I'm Detective Buckley, and that's Joel. Hi. It's evident based on the way they look and talk to each other that Joel and Rose have a history together. Detective Buckley asks some pretty curt and tactless questions, ready to write this off as an accident and that Laura was just some helpless case. It's at this point that I was thinking that maybe Smile is about the difficulties of dealing with past trauma and mental illness, and just how hard it is to deal with those, let alone get help and feel validated and understood. Rose finally heads home, where we are introduced to her cat, Mustache. And I mustache you a question. Will you please subscribe to my channel? Rose notices a few drops of Laura's blood on her blouse, so she takes a shower before pouring herself a glass of mommy's fun juice. It's wine o'clock somewhere. Leaning up against the fridge, Rose looks across her kitchen and sees what looks like the silhouette of Laura standing there, smiling creepily in the corner. Rose is then startled by her fiancé Trevor, who also is not credited with a last name. Maybe Rose just has a thing for men with no last names. I'm assuming her favorite artists are Cher, Madonna, Prince. Rose is so startled that she drops her glass of wine and it shatters on the floor. Trevor suggests that maybe they skip out on dinner with Rose's sister and her husband that evening, but Rose refuses. And this is where I learned that I am nothing like Rose. Give me the slightest inconvenience and I'm pulling the plug on all of my plans and staying home. At dinner, Rose is zoning out again while her sister Holly is complaining about just how difficult it is to raise her own kid. And then Holly and her husband Greg get annoyed that Rose has to work and save lives this weekend instead of being able to make it to their precious baby's birthday party. Before Rose says,
"Can you guys just shut the fuck up?"
I like Rose. Holly also tells Rose that they should sell their childhood home, but Rose isn't ready to talk about it yet. Just make a mental note that they own an old abandoned home because it'll come back later. At the hospital the next day, Rose is starting to show signs of lack of sleep. She's zoning out and drinking lots of coffee. Frankie Muniz, Joel, comes to apologize if things were awkward during the police investigation, while also making things super awkward right now. Rose leaves, and the receptionist says to Joel, "You know she's engaged, right?" He says, "Yeah." And she says, "I'm single." Receptionist lady got game. Mad respect. Holly calls Rose to apologize for what happened over dinner, while Rose is looking out of her window and sees what looks like someone just kind of standing up and staring at her from the courtyard, but it's too far away to really tell what they're looking at. She then walks down the hall before stopping at her patient Carl's room, who is just sitting there, smiling at her. He suddenly starts yelling at her that she's going to die. It wasn't exactly a threat. Technically he's right. Rose turns to yell to have the patient restrained, but when the camera pans back, we see Carl just sleeping on his bed before the orderlies come in and restrain him on the ground. Rose's boss gives her a paid week off because it's clear that she's making mistakes and working too much. At first, Rose says that's not necessary, and again, I have never related to a character less than at this moment. Back at home, Rose has some more wine, and for some reason I could not stop thinking about Herb Ertlinger's fruit wine from Schitt's Creek. Herb Ertlinger's fruit wine. Rose takes a well-deserved break from wrapping her nephew's birthday present to have even more wine before her security alarm goes off and she breaks yet another glass. Somebody give this woman a sippy cup at this point. She sees that her back door is open and then gets an incredibly loud phone call from a woman who claims to be working at the security company. She asks Rose, "Are you alone in the house?" And Rose says, "Yes." And then she asks, "Are you sure?" And to me, I already knew this was the demon thing messing with Rose because she's obviously hallucinating having a landline in 2022. The lady on the phone says, "Look behind you." And Rose gives us the slowest turn before the phone rings again from across the room, and it turns out Rose hallucinated answering the phone this whole time. Scarily enough, she did not hallucinate having a landline. The police investigate and say there's no one there and it was probably a false alarm. And Rose's husband Trevor comes home and asks her if she broke another glass.
"Rose, did you break another glass?"
Rose mentions that the cat Mustache is missing before she has a nightmare of the woman from the beginning of the movie. Rose wakes up and then goes to the kitchen and listens to the audio recording of her session with Laura. And in the audio file, it almost sounds like someone's whispering, "Rose," at a time where neither of the two women are speaking. This whole scene is just a setup for a jump scare, and personally, I don't think loud noises are really all that scary, just startling. Rose puts her face right up to the computer screen after turning the volume up all the way, as if being closer to the computer will make her headphones louder, and right as she leans in, Ghost Laura appears next to her and screams, "Rose! Pooh! Gotcha!" And Rose flies out of her chair, screaming. Clearly, she's reaching the end of her rope. Now, you can argue that this scene was necessary because it shows a breaking point for Rose, which then leads her to go see her own therapist in the next scene. However, I think now is a good time to say that this movie is almost 2 hours long and the pacing is really slow at times. It's important and fun in horror movies to have scare scenes that show what our main character is going through and how they're feeling, while also showing what a monster or a killer is capable of. But I think some of these scenes are needlessly long just for the sake of adding jump scares. I think they could have picked either the alarm scene or the computer noise jump scare, since neither of these two were all that crucial to the plot. The point was to scare Rose enough so that she'll see her therapist the next day. And neither the computer audio nor the alarm come up again at any point in the movie, so I don't really feel like either one was more important than the other. The next day, Rose goes to see her own therapist, Dr. Northcott, and tries to convince her to prescribe some pills since her daily bottle of wine isn't calming her nerves. Dr. Northcott is convinced that seeing what happened to Laura has triggered some past trauma that Rose hasn't fully dealt with, most likely to deal with her mother. And in a way, Rose has become Laura and is getting similar reactions from medical professionals when she's asking for help. Now that Rose is on paid leave, she has time to go to her nephew Jackson's birthday party. Her sister Holly previously mentioned that Jackson was starting Spanish lessons, so every time he opens a present, he says, "Gracias, Harper. Gracias, Harper's mom." And I just thought that was really annoying. Jackson goes to open Rose's present, which we assume is a model train, but instead of hearing "Gracias, Tia Rose," Jackson unwraps his gift and holds up the body of Mustache the cat. No esperabas recibir un gato muerto para tu regalo de cumpleaños, Jackson? At this point, everyone looks at Rose like she's some sort of freak, but I guess I just wouldn't assume that someone intentionally gifted a dead animal to a child for his birthday. I feel like I would assume someone's playing a cruel prank on Rose, but everyone at the party acts like she did it on purpose. And she ends up seeing a lady sitting and smiling that signature smile before she gets jump scared into falling into a glass table, like that one New Zealand commercial telling you to clean up your dirty house. Rose goes to the hospital for her glass table related injuries, and on the way home, she confesses to her husband Trevor that she is being haunted by the demon that killed her last patient, and that goes over like a lead balloon. Rose is looking a little rough around the edges before looking up Laura's professor, who himself. Rose then hears what appears to be her mother's voice coming from the bathroom before she closes her computer, turns on her side, and tries to fall asleep while this voice keeps talking to her and keeps her awake. The next day, Rose goes over to Laura's professor's house, and Carla from Scrubs answers the door. She explains to Rose that her late husband started seeing this demon right after he saw someone else banish themselves to the shadow realm a week prior. Rose then abuses her personal relations and gets Joel to look into confidential reports about Laura's professor, and it turns out there's a pattern of someone witnessing a brutal self-ending, and then about a week later, they do the same thing to themselves. So as the audience, we can draw the conclusion that that's how this thing is passed from one person to the next. Rose goes over to her sister Holly's house to show her a bunch of police photographs of mutilated bodies in a very smart attempt to convince her that she is not losing her mind. Obviously, Holly doesn't believe her, but she does say that Rose is acting just like their mother did before she died. Which, again, could go with the theme of struggling with mental illness if this movie wasn't so preoccupied with wasting our time with jump scares. But I did like that one. Joel calls Rose to tell her that he found the only victim affected by the curse who is still alive. So they drive out to speak with him. We learn in the car that none of the other victims lasted more than a week, and Rose has already been cursed for 4 days, which means I love Majora's Mask. It turns out the only survivor of the curse, Robert Talley, is in prison, and he tells Rose that the only way to survive this curse is to somebody else and make sure someone watches. We're then treated to another scare scene that I think could have been cut from this almost 2-hour film. Rose's therapist makes a home visit and tells her that she needs to convince her that she's not a danger to herself or others. While Rose is explaining how her life is in a downward spiral, she gets a phone call from her therapist. What? But how? Her therapist is, oh, it's the demon and it's threatening her again. Okay. I will say, I think the therapist has the most unsettling smile in the entire movie, so there's that, I guess. They also kind of do an Aliens 3 shot at the end, which I thought was just a little silly. Rose contemplates chopping up Carl, her patient from earlier, all while her boss watches, but it turns out to be a vivid daydream. Like, not even a hallucination from the demon, she's just having a daydream in the car. There is absolutely no way I can show you this on YouTube, but maybe I can just play some of the sounds from the scene. Great. Rose then comes to the realization that she needs to be alone, which is what I say to myself every time I go to any social gathering ever. Remember that one line about the sisters owning an old house? Well, here we are. On the way there, Rose gets a phone call from Joel where she tells him that she can't pass along this curse if there's no one around, and so she's gonna face the demon alone. Joel says that doesn't make any sense, and I almost called Jinx because I was thinking the same thing. While walking around this decrepit home, we get a brief flashback of Rose's mom laying in bed, saying she made a mistake and asks little kid Rose to call for help. Instead, she is scared of her mother and closes the door, and we presume that her mother passes away. At this point, I assume Rose's motivation for becoming a therapist is because she blames herself for this moment and hopes to help others deal with their own trauma. So she is somehow the most well-equipped person to deal with a demon who latches onto trauma, yet does nothing to deal with it outside of asking for prescription pills. Okay. Rose shuts all the blinds and lights a lantern for some reason. I know there's no electricity in this old house, but the demon can appear in the daytime too. Then she sits in a chair for a while, just kind of waiting around. She hears the door to her mom's room creak open, and the demon takes the form of her late mother. We get a little back and forth before Rose declares that she is letting go of this guilt and moving on with her life. The demon then grows really tall and its wig starts falling off before it chokes Rose on the floor, saying, "You can't escape your mind." To which Rose, who is still being choked by the way, has to get in one last quippy zinger and says, "It's my mind. You can't escape it either," before smashing the lantern on the demon's head, lighting it on fire, and burning the house down. This is similar to a scene in my previous video, The Boogeyman, but I think The Boogeyman was handled way better and there was actually a point in making that movie. Rose drives to her side piece Joel's house, not her partner Trevor's, and she apologizes for dragging him into her whole fucked up. This woman, who has a fiance, goes on to explain how she was scared to let people in until she met Joel. And then she got scared and ruined her relationship with him.
Boo-hoo! Let me play a sad song for you on the world's smallest violin.
She then asks if she can sleep over and if he'll stay with her. And he says, "Of course I'll stay with you." "I'll stay with you forever." Oh boy, another fake out. Rose is still at her childhood home, so I don't really know what she was doing while she was hallucinating going over to Joel's house, but whatever. It turns out the real Joel shows up, I would assume, by tracking her phone, and Rose recognizes how much danger he's in, so she locks the front door. However, when she sees the demon, which I will admit is probably the scariest part of this entire movie, she starts screaming so loudly that you just know Joel is gonna bust in to try to save her. The demon sheds its skin and kind of looks like a weird chicken cutlet before it slides itself into Rose's mouth. Joel breaks in and sees Rose pouring lighter fluid on herself with a creepy smile, lights a match, and goes up in flames, all while Joel watches in terror. And the credits roll. I have some immediate thoughts just about the ending. What if Joel knocked her out or restrained Rose? Would she just be like the smiling demon forever? What if he turned around or didn't look? What if you were eternally unaffected, like you weren't traumatized by this event at all? Would you still be cursed by this demon that needs trauma And what if Rose sacrificed herself before the demon did it for her? It may have been hinted at in a few shots, but Rose never really considered sacrificing herself to end the cycle, especially when Joel is about to be cursed next. Like I said, this movie is so freaking long for no reason. The pacing is so slow, but it's not a slow burn mystery that keeps you invested. It just sets up scenes to scare Rose, which end up being LOL, JK, it was the demon making you see things the whole time. I will say Sosie Bacon puts this movie on her back. Her performance as Rose Cotter is wonderful. But all in all, I think this movie is safe to just let me watch it for you. I'll tell you what I do like about horror movies that keeps me invested in the genre. Obviously, campy gore and dark humor are great, but I think the horror genre works really well as a metaphor for real-world problems. I also really like when the main character or cast survives to the end as a means to show growth or perseverance or strength when faced with overwhelming odds. There aren't any smile demons in real life, but mental illness and the way it's stigmatized are real problems that could have been explored. Instead, this movie just kind of makes you feel hopeless. Why go through the struggle of dealing with all your trauma if the solution posed by this movie is complete isolation from the world or passing on your trauma and endangering those around you? I just think if you want to end the movie with our main character succumbing to the curse, maybe have her fail at dealing with her traumas, showing the audience that we have to make the tough choice to get up and deal with our traumas every day and seek the help we need rather than isolate ourselves. Or maybe the actual lesson is work-life balance and don't answer calls when you're off the clock. As always, thank you for watching me ramble about a horror movie. I am so lucky I get to talk about something I love with people who are interested in having discussions with me. Subscribing is a great way to let me know you enjoyed the video, and it helps me out a ton. I stream most days over on Twitch, and my channel will be linked in the description below. If you ever want to hang and play some music or some scary games, you can directly support this channel by becoming a member of my Patreon and joining us for our monthly movie night. And I think that's it for housekeeping. If you have any ideas for what I should watch for you next, let me know in the comments below. Once again, I'm Matt Hall, and if you don't have the time or don't want to spend the dime, let me watch that for you. Bye-bye!